child, so pure and so kind. Kathy, they called her, met her doom that day. I know it was God that called her away.
At this moment in San Marino, California, rescue workers are still digging feverishly to reach a 3-year-old child trapped in the 14-inch casing of an abandoned well. The little girl's name is Kathy-Fiscus. Yesterday afternoon, about 5, she'd been playing with her 9-year-old sister and a cousin in a vacant lot. Suddenly, Kathy took a misstep and plunged into the narrow opening of the dry well.
That was a radio account from a story that started 60 years ago today. But radio wasn't the story. It was the new medium of television that was on the spot, covering the 50-hour effort to rescue little Kathy-Fiscus, 2.5 years old, who had fallen down an abandoned water well in San Marino. It was at a time when there were maybe 20,000 television sets in all of Los Angeles, and the idea of a live broadcast from a news event was almost unthinkable and certainly virtually unheard of until the effort to free Kathy-Fiscus made people gather in front of hardware stores where televisions were turned on 24 hours a day and introduce themselves to their neighbors who happened to have television sets just so they could watch what was happening. Two people who know what was happening join me. Bill Deverell, professor of American history at USC, who delivered the 2009 Haynes Foundation lecture on the Kathy-Fiscus tragedy at the Huntington Library. Bill, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Pat.
And my old friend Stan Chambers, the KTLA reporter who broadcast some of that 27.5 hours of KTLA coverage of the Kathy-Fiscus tragedy in San Marino. Stan, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Pat. That was a day I'll never forget. Incredible.
You have told this story so many times. It's good of you to tell it again. But just briefly, how was this so significant to you and to the history of television in L.A.?
Well, it was the first time that a television station went to a scene and actually televised the entire event. We didn't leave for 1 second the whole time. And, of course, we didn't know what was happening, and we had to find that out, and why were they digging that way, and just the whole thing. And gradually that evolved into an amazing emotional event for the whole city, because here was this beautiful little girl who had fallen into this pipe, and they were trying to get her out, and, of course, having no luck whatsoever. And this is the first time that you took a television camera to a scene. They were just too big, they were too bulky, they were too difficult to work with. But these cameras were just perfect the whole way, and we credit our great station manager, Klaus Landsberg, at the time. He had the foresight that if you brought people to the scene of an event, they'll be there as long as you want them there.
And certainly they were, Bill Deverell. This revolutionized television in Los Angeles and maybe elsewhere.
Question. Yeah, there's no question. I think its ramifications spread out across the nation, if not the world. So TV proved very nimble in getting to that site. By Saturday morning, she fell into the well on late Friday afternoon, and by Saturday morning, both KTLA and KTTV were there. And as Mr. Chambers notes, they were there for the whole thing from then on.
And Bill, the story, part of the story has an interesting angle because her father, who was an engineer who had just been in Sacramento testifying about the dangers of these uncapped wells. Yeah,
her father managed the vacant lot that the well was in, right adjacent to their home, and he'd recently been in Sacramento talking about the danger of pollution from uncapped wells. And ironically, within a matter of days, really, she fell into the one that was right next to their home.
Stan, 10 years ago on the 50th anniversary of this event, I interviewed Kathy-Fiscus' mother, who has since passed away, and she said even years later, people, if she gave a credit card, would say, "Fiscus, are you any relation to that little girl?" This really resonated, and you didn't know really until you left the scene of this story. People stopped you on the street to talk about this. It has resonated down through the decades.
And we had no idea that it was making that impact because we were busy with what we were doing and going from event to event, and it was a great shock. And, of course, it changed my whole career. That's literally how I got started in television news. And one other personal event, I met my late wife, blind date, because of the Kathy-Fiscus telecast. So it changed my professional life and my private life.
How did that happen?
Well, a friend of mine who was at SC together, and she said, I want you to meet my sister. At SC, I was very interested, and we got married shortly after that.
Stan Chambers at KTLA. At that time, of course, people weren't used to seeing TV news cameras in the field. And did people react differently at the scene? Were they even aware the cameras were there, the rescuers, the workers?
To a certain degree they were, but everyone was awfully busy, and we still had the old cameras, big and bulky with big cables, and they didn't move very easily. And this, again, was because of Klaus Landsberg. He said, we should be there and get those cameras out of the truck and get them to the scene. And he made the call because we didn't really realize the impact when we started the story.
And Bill Deverell, Kathy-Fiscus' mother, told me that with television, the world's right there every minute now. It's not something that happened a week ago yesterday. It's right in your lap 24 hours a day. How difficult was this for people to digest?
It was new. It was immediate. It was happening right before their very eyes. And also, as Mr. Chambers has written and talked about quite a bit, the level of anticipation at the site was really profound because many people thought that she would be pulled out of there alive. She'd fallen in, she'd spoken and cried for a while, and so the level of sheer anticipation really galvanized the crowd, both there and then, of course, in the television world.
In the shock of finding out that she had died, Stan, did you have to tell viewers that the little girl was dead?
Well, we were among the first because the rumble was there, and then the official announcement came. But we waited till they made the official announcement. It was that emotional, and you just felt that's the only thing you could do. People had invested so much of their time watching. You wanted to make sure that what was said was official and final.
And Stan, Walter Cronkite teared up when he had to announce that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. Is that how you and your colleagues on television felt?
I think that is a good example. You're just overcome by the whole dimension of what had happened, and you're right in the middle of it, and you knew all of the men who went down in the big hole they dug next to the pipe, and they were crying, and it was just a huge emotional scene, and I remember it so vividly all of these years.
And Bill Deverell, I can't think of any stories outside of the scope of things like the Challenger explosion or the Kennedy assassination where people who witnessed it still remember it all these decades later as they do what happened with Kathy-Fiscus. How much of that was the story and how much of it was the medium of television?
I think they're completely interwoven and related. I think you're absolutely right. I think for us in Southern California, it is a kind of Kennedy event. It's at the dawn of television. There's the anticipation this little girl will be found alive, and people are just riveted to it. And, of course, that level of interest is maintained over the interim 60 years. People remember absolutely where they were, and many of them, of course, went to the site.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Stan Chambers, my pal at KTLA, who broadcast from the event, the Kathy-Fiscus rescue attempt and her death began 60 years ago today. Stan, thanks as always.
Oh, thank you, Pat. I really enjoyed being with you.
And Bill Deverell teaches American history at USC. He delivered the 2009 Hayes Foundation lecture on the Kathy-Fiscus tragedy at the Huntington Library 60 years ago today.